In a small, cozy house filled with the smell of baking bread and old, beloved books, lived a little boy named Leo. Leo's favorite thing in the whole world was his patchwork quilt. It wasn't a new quilt. In fact, it was very, very old. It had been made by his grandmother, Elara, who had made it from scraps and pieces of fabric she had saved over a lifetime. Each square was different. There was a fuzzy, warm, red flannel square from his grandfather's winter shirt, a smooth, cool, blue silk square from his mother's first party dress, and a bumpy, green corduroy square from his own very first pair of overalls. Leo loved the feel of all the different textures beneath his fingers as he drifted off to sleep. He loved the beautiful jumble of colors and patterns, but most of all, he loved the stories the quilt told. For this was no ordinary quilt. As his grandmother had explained to him, it was a quilt of memories, and every single patch held a little piece of their family's story, waiting to be remembered. Every night, just before he went to sleep, Leo and his grandma Elara would share a special ritual. Grandma Elara would sit on the edge of his bed, her kind, wrinkled face full of love, and Leo would point to one of the squares on the quilt. And as he pointed, his grandmother would tell him the memory held within that patch. That one, she would say, her voice as soft as the quilt itself. That little piece of yellow gingham was from the tablecloth we used for your mother's 5th birthday picnic. The sun was so bright that day, and we ate strawberry cake until our tummies ached. As she spoke, the little yellow square would begin to glow with a soft, warm, internal golden light, as if the happy memory were waking up inside it. Then Leo would point to another patch, a dark, velvety blue one. "Ah, that one," she'd sigh happily. "That was from your great-grandfather's waistcoat. He wore it on the night he first danced with your great-grandmother under a sky full of 1,000,000 stars." And the velvet patch would begin to glow, its light soft and deep like the night sky. This was their game, a journey through the past. A way of wrapping Leo not just in a warm blanket, but in all the love and happiness of the family that had come before him. There was one patch that was Leo's absolute favorite. It was a small, simple square in the very center of the quilt. It was made of the softest, most faded, pale blue flannel, and it was covered in tiny, silvery white stars that had been stitched on with shimmering thread. "Tell me that one again, Grandma," Leo would whisper every night. Grandma Elara would smile her kindest smile. "That," she would say, her voice growing even softer, "is the most important patch of all. That is the Lullaby Patch. It is a piece of the blanket your great-great-grandmother wrapped your grandfather in when he was just a tiny baby." And every night, she would sing him a special lullaby, a song about a little bear who climbed a moonbeam to count the stars. As she spoke, the pale blue patch with its tiny, stitched stars would begin to glow with a gentle, silvery golden light. "The lullaby is woven into the very threads of that patch," she explained. "It's a song of deep sleep and sweet, peaceful dreams. As long as that patch is on your quilt, the lullaby will watch over you all night long and keep all the bad dreams away." Leo loved this patch the most. He would always place it right over his heart as he fell asleep, feeling the gentle, silent music protecting him. One night, after Grandma Elara had kissed him goodnight and closed his door, a strong, chilly autumn wind rattled the old window frame of Leo's room. A sudden, powerful draft blew through a crack in the frame, rustling the curtains and sending a shiver through the room. The wind caught the corner of the ancient memory quilt. Leo watched, his eyes wide as a single, old thread that held the lullaby patch in place finally gave way. The thread, worn thin by 100 years of love and use, snapped with a sound no louder than a sigh. The little blue patch, now free from the quilt, was lifted into the air by the draft. It didn't fall to the floor. Instead, it floated like a single, soft feather, tumbling gently on the current of air. The draft pulled it from his bed, across his room, and then, with a final, mischievous puff, it was whisked out of the room through the small gap under his bedroom door. Leo sat bolt upright in bed, his heart pounding. The lullaby patch was gone. He looked at the empty space in the center of his quilt. It looked like a dark, empty hole. For the first time, his bed felt cold and unprotected. The silent, magical music was gone, and he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he would not be able to sleep without it. Leo knew he couldn't just stay in bed. He had to find the patch. The draft had come from the hallway, and the hallway led to the old, creaky, pull-down stairs that went up into the attic. That must be where the wind had carried it. A little shiver of fear went through him. The attic was a dark and spooky place at night, full of strange shapes and deep shadows. But the thought of sleeping without the lullaby's protection was even scarier. He took a deep breath, channeling the courage from his grandfather's flannel patch, which was still on his quilt. He swung his little legs out of bed, his bare feet making a soft padding sound on the wooden floor. He tiptoed out of his room and into the dark hallway. The house was completely silent except for the low whistle of the wind and the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. He found a long piece of string that hung from the ceiling and, standing on his tiptoes, he pulled it with all his might. With a loud, echoing groan, the heavy wooden ladder of the attic stairs unfolded from the ceiling and settled on the floor with a soft thud. A wave of cool, dusty air washed over him, smelling of old wood and forgotten things. He took one last look back at his cozy, safe bedroom, then turned and began to climb, step by creaky step, into the darkness above. The attic was even darker and spookier than he had imagined. The only light came from a single, small, round window at the far end, through which the pale moonlight streamed, casting long, eerie shadows across the dusty floor. The air was thick, with the smell of old paper and lavender from his grandmother's sachets. The attic was filled with the forgotten treasures of his family, but in the darkness, they looked like strange, looming monsters. An old dressmaker's mannequin in the corner looked like a headless person. A stack of old hat boxes looked like a leaning, crooked tower, and a large, white sheet draped over a piece of furniture looked like a giant, sleeping ghost. Leo's heart beat like a little drum in his chest. He stood frozen for a moment at the top of the stairs, wanting to turn and run back to his bed. But then he thought of the lullaby patch, lost and alone somewhere in this sea of shadows. He remembered the feeling of its soft, protective glow, and he knew he had to be brave. He took a tentative step forward, his bare feet sinking slightly into the thick, soft dust that covered the floorboards, and began his search, his eyes scanning the darkness for a tiny scrap of pale blue flannel. As Leo crept further into the attic, his eyes slowly began to adjust to the dim light. He saw a shape he recognized, his father's old wooden rocking horse. Its paint was chipped, and one of its yarn-tail strands had come loose. He remembered the patch on his quilt, a small square of red and white checkered fabric. Grandma Elara had told him it was from his father's shirt, the one he wore when he was a little boy, the day he rode this very rocking horse for the first time. As Leo reached out and gently touched the rocking horse's worn, wooden head, a magical thing happened. A soft, warm, golden light began to glow from within the horse, pulsing gently. And in his mind, he saw a black and white, dreamlike image of his own father as a little boy, laughing with pure joy as he rocked back and forth, his feet not even reaching the floor. The memory was not scary. It was happy and full of love. It made Leo feel a little bit braver. He realized the attic wasn't a place of scary monsters. It was a place of sleeping memories, just like his quilt. The thought gave him courage. He gave the rocking horse one last pat and continued his search for the lullaby patch, his own heart feeling a little warmer now. Guided by a new sense of wonder instead of fear, Leo continued his search. He moved past a tall wooden wardrobe and noticed a corner of a large, flat box sticking out from underneath. He knelt down and pulled it out. It was an old, beautiful box tied with a faded silk ribbon. Carefully, he untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in delicate tissue paper, was a beautiful, old-fashioned wedding veil, made of fine, intricate lace and dotted with tiny seed pearls. It was his grandmother's. He remembered the patch on his quilt, a small, lacy, ivory-colored square. As his fingers brushed against the soft, delicate lace of the veil, it too began to glow. This time with a soft, silvery white light, as bright and as pure as the full moon. He saw another memory bloom in his mind, a vision of his own grandmother. Alara as a beautiful young woman, her face full of love and happiness on her wedding day, the veil draped over her dark, wavy hair. The memory was so full of joy that it made Leo smile. He felt the love of his grandparents wrapping around him like a warm hug. The attic was no longer a place of fear at all. It was a room full of love, a library of his family's happiest moments. He carefully closed the box, retied the ribbon, and pushed it back under the wardrobe. His spirit lifted and his determination to find the lost patch stronger than ever. Leo was now exploring the attic with pure curiosity. Every object he touched seemed to hold a story. He found an old sea chest that glowed with the memory of his great-grandfather's voyages, and a dusty old telescope that glowed with the memory of his aunt watching a comet streak across the sky. He felt like he was walking through the secret history of his family. Finally, he reached the far side of the attic, right under the small, round window. There, on the floor, almost hidden in the dust, was a single, tiny, leather baby shoe. It was so small, he could hold it in the palm of his hand. It was worn and scuffed from the first clumsy steps of a baby learning to walk. He thought of the patch on his quilt made of a soft, worn piece of leather. As he picked up the tiny shoe, it began to glow with a gentle, steady, golden light. The memory that came to him this time was of his own mother as a baby, taking her very first wobbly step into the waiting arms of her father. The feeling was one of immense pride, boundless love, and the hopeful promise of a new life beginning its journey. He felt a deep connection to all the people who had come before him, all the love and all the stories that had led to him. A little boy in blue pajamas, standing in an attic in the middle of the night. It was then, as he stood there holding the glowing baby shoe, that he saw it. The moonlight streaming through the round window was illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, making them look like a swirling galaxy. And caught in the very center of this swirling dance, tumbling over and over in the gentle draft from the window, was a small, pale blue square of flannel, its tiny, stitched stars winking in the moonlight. It was the lullaby patch. It had not fallen to the floor, but had been kept afloat by the gentle, circulating air, waiting for him to find it. A wave of pure relief and happiness washed over Leo. He carefully placed the baby shoe back on the floor and reached up with both hands. He stood on his tiptoes, stretching as high as he could, and just as the little patch began to drift down, he caught it gently in his hands. It felt incredibly soft and familiar, and as he held it, it began to glow with its warm, silvery golden light. It felt like holding a tiny piece of peaceful sleep, a little square of comfort and safety. He had done it. He had faced the spooky shadows and the looming monsters, and he had found the missing piece of his heart. Holding the precious patch carefully in both hands, Leo turned and began his journey back across the attic. But the room was no longer scary at all. The glowing memories he had awoken were still shining softly, casting a warm and friendly light. All around him, the rocking horse pulsed with a happy, golden glow. The wedding veil shone with a soft, silvery light, and the tiny baby shoe added its own steady gleam. The attic was no longer a place of shadows, but a beautiful, gentle constellation of his family's love. The dressmaker's mannequin now just looked like a funny, old doll, and the stacks of hat boxes looked like a wonderful, crooked tower to be explored another day. He was not afraid. He felt as if all the love and courage from those sleeping memories were walking with him, guiding his steps. He walked with a newfound confidence, his bare feet making soft prints in the thick dust. He reached the ladder and carefully made his way down, one step at a time, clutching the glowing lullaby patch to his chest. As his feet touched the solid floor of the hallway, he felt like a brave adventurer returning home from a great and successful quest, carrying a priceless treasure. Leo tiptoed back into his bedroom. The first thing he did was gently close his bedroom door, leaving only a tiny crack so a little air could still get through, but not enough to cause a strong draft. Then he climbed back into his bed and looked at the empty square in the center of his quilt. It looked so sad and lonely. He knew he had to fix it. He laid the glowing lullaby patch back in its rightful place. It fit perfectly, like the last piece of a puzzle. But he knew it wouldn't stay on its own. He looked around his room and his eyes fell on his mother's little sewing kit, which she had left on his dresser after mending a button on his teddy bear. He climbed out of bed again, brought the kit over, and found a needle and a piece of soft, white thread. He had watched his grandmother sew 100 times, her fingers moving with a slow and steady rhythm. He tried to copy her movements. His own stitches were not as neat or as perfect as hers. They were a little wobbly and uneven, but he sewed with all the love and care in his heart, his little brow furrowed in concentration. He stitched all the way around the little blue square, his small fingers carefully pushing the needle in and out of the old, soft fabric. With the final stitch made and the thread knotted, the quilt was whole again. As soon as the patch was secure, a wonderful thing happened. The entire memory quilt began to glow. A wave of warm, golden light pulsed out from the lullaby patch, flowing through the seams and into every other square. The red flannel of his grandfather's shirt glowed with warmth. The blue silk of his mother's dress glowed with joy, and the green corduroy of his overalls glowed with happy energy. Every single memory, every piece of his family's story was reconnected to the heart of the quilt, and they all began to glow together in a beautiful, harmonious symphony of light. The quilt was no longer just a collection of patches. It was a living, breathing map of his family's love, and its heart was beating strong once more. The soft, silvery golden light filled his entire room, chasing away every last shadow and making the space feel incredibly safe, warm, and full of love. Leo sighed a deep, happy sigh. He had not only found the missing piece, he had made the quilt even stronger, adding his own memory to it, the memory of a brave little boy who had faced the dark to mend what was broken. Leo snuggled down under the warm, glowing quilt, his head sinking into his soft pillow. He pulled the quilt up to his chin and placed his hand over the lullaby patch, right over his heart. As he closed his eyes, he could hear it. For the first time, he could actually hear the lullaby. It wasn't with his ears, but with his heart. It was the most beautiful, gentle, and soothing melody he had ever heard. It was the song of his great-great-grandmother, a timeless tune woven from threads of pure love and protection. The song whispered of a little bear cub, just like him, who was brave and kind. It told of how the cub climbed a shimmering moonbeam, all the way to the top of the sky, where he danced with the friendly, twinkling stars before sliding gently back down to his cozy bed. The music was as soft as flannel and as gentle as a grandmother's hug. It wrapped around him, chasing away the last of his worries and filling him with a deep and profound sense of peace. The adventure was over, the quilt was whole, and he was safe, tucked in a blanket of light and a lullaby of love. With the silent lullaby playing in his heart, Leo felt a wonderful, heavy sleepiness begin to creep over him. His breathing grew slow and steady, matching the gentle, pulsing glow of the quilt. He felt the warmth of his grandfather's love from the flannel patch, the joy of his mother's memory from the silk patch, and the brave, adventurous spirit of his own memory from the corduroy patch. He was wrapped in the strength, love, and happiness of his entire family. The magical memories from the attic, the laughing little boy on the rocking horse, the beautiful young bride, the baby taking her first step, swirled gently in his mind, not as spooky ghosts, but as kind and loving guardians watching over him. He was not just a little boy sleeping in a bed. He was the keeper of these precious stories, the next link in a long and beautiful chain of love. The lullaby patch glowed its brightest, its silvery golden light a promise of the sweetest, most peaceful dreams. And as the grandfather clock in, the hall chimed softly. Leo, the brave little adventurer, drifted off into a deep, happy, and completely fearless sleep. And so, Leo slept soundly, wrapped in a quilt of love and a lullaby of memories. Now it's your turn to find the warmth in your own cozy blankets. Close your eyes, think of a happy memory, and let it carry you into a wonderful dream. Good night. If you enjoyed our fable tonight, we hope you'll join us again. Please like and subscribe to Bedtimes Fable to help us share more gentle stories with the world. Sweet dreams.